I was 25, working for the mail service of El Salvador, making just enough to live alone in a tiny place on the outskirts of the city. The job wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. My days were long, driving through all 14 departments of the country, delivering packages, letters, anything people needed. By the time the sun went down, I was still on the road, heading to the far-flung towns nobody else wanted to deliver to. That night was like any other. I had just finished my last delivery in a small town nestled in the mountains. It was a 2-hour drive back home, most of it through winding roads that cut through dense forest. The kind of road where your headlights were the only light and the darkness swallowed everything else. When you work at nights, it is common to lose your sleep schedule, or just plain out forget the concept of sleep schedule. Back then I was a rookie, so my mood was always bad and I was stressed out. I was always tired, always drifting in and out of sleep behind the wheel, but that night, I was wide awake. About halfway through the drive, the radio cut out. Just static. It wasn't unusual out here, where signals faded quickly. The silence passed in, heavy and unnerving. So I cracked the window, hoping the rush of cool night air would keep me alert. The wind howled through the trees, rattling the branches, but there was something different about it that night. It started as a distant sound, barely audible over the noise of the wind. A scream, long and piercing, but far away. At first I thought it was some kind of animal, maybe a coyote or a bird. But the sound didn't fade. It stayed, hanging in the air like something unnatural. I tightened my grip on the wheel, my palms sweaty. The road ahead was cloaked in a fog, thick and rolling and faster than I'd ever seen. My heart pounded in my chest as the scream grew louder, like it was getting closer. I rounded a curve and that's when I saw him. Standing in the middle of the road, barely visible through the fog, was a figure. My headlights washed over him. Just a shadow at first, but then I saw his clothes. Torn, hanging off his frame like they had been shredded by something wild. He didn't move, didn't flinch as the truck barreled toward him. I slammed on the brakes, tires screeching on the wet pavement. The truck stopped just a few feet away from him. My hand shook on the steering wheel. I should have turned around, should have gunned the engine and gotten the hell out of there. But I didn't. I couldn't. I stared at him, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. He was tall, thin, his head bowed, so I couldn't see his face, and his skin was pale. Almost too pale that light from the headlights reflected on him. I figured that he was somehow the source of the screaming. The scream echoed again, louder this time. And it was then that I realized it wasn't coming from him. It was coming from everywhere. The air itself seemed to vibrate with the sound, sharp and relentless. I wanted to move, to reverse the truck, but my body felt frozen, paralyzed by some primal fear I couldn't explain. And then slowly, the figure lifted his head. His face, or what was left of it, was pale, glowing more than the rest of his body. His eyes were empty, dark hollows that seemed to swallow the light. His mouth twisted in a grotesque grin, and before I could react, he opened it. The scream that followed was unlike anything I've heard. It wasn't human. It was a force, a violent blast of sound that slammed into me like a physical weight. My ears rang, my vision blurred, I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The scream filled every part of me. Ripping through my body like jagged glass, I clutched my head, trying to block out the sound, but it was inside me, tearing at my mind. I don't know how long I sat there, trapped in the truck, the scream filling the night, when it finally stopped. I was gasping for air, drenched in sweat. The figure was gone. The road ahead was empty, the fog slowly lifting as if nothing had happened. I made it home that night, though I don't remember the drive. I parked the truck in front of my house, my hands still shaking, my ears still ringing. I stumbled inside, collapsed on the couch, and tried to convince myself that it wasn't real. Just exhaustion, hallucinations from lack of sleep, stress. But then, the scream came again. At first it was distant, barely a whisper in the back of my mind. I'd hear it late at night, when the world was quiet, when there was nothing else to distract me. I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, my eyes heavy but unable to sleep. The scream would echo faintly, growing louder, as if it was searching for me. It didn't stop. It followed me to work, creeping into my mind during the long drives, whispering in the silence between deliveries. Every day it got worse. The scream was always there, sometimes faint, sometimes so loud I thought I'd lose my mind. I couldn't focus, couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I saw doctors hoping they could explain the ringing in my ears, the phantom sounds. They told me it was stress, maybe tightness. They didn't understand. Nobody did. I tried to drown it out with noise blasting the radio, filling my house with music, but nothing worked. The scream cut through everything, relentless, inescapable. It became my constant companion, always lurking at the edge of my thoughts. Now, years later, I live with it. I have no choice. The scream never leaves, no matter where I go. It's a part of me now. I hear it even as I write this, faint but insistent, like a distant cry carried on in the wind. I survived that night, but I know I didn't escape. One day, the scream will get louder, loud enough to drown out everything else. When that day comes, I don't think I'll survive again.